All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Classic Comics. And another Trek Talk. This week, I'm going to be taking a look at the original series episode, Wolf in the Fold. A personal favorite. Any episode that features Scotty always is one I enjoy. Hello, Adega. Hey, man. Thanks for stopping by. Good to see you. And also, Lord Thoth. Thank you both for being here. Uh, been a couple of weeks. I just got wrapped up with other things, and I really needed to focus on those. But it's good to be back. Okay. So yes, Wolf in the Fold. Uh, this episode was written by Robert Bloch. Let me see. Do I have? Well, I'll go a step at a time here. Let me back up. But with Gene Kuhn and Gene Roddenberry also doing some rewriting, and directed by Joseph Pevney. This is from an NBC press release, November 27, 1967. Captain Kirk risks the lives of his entire personnel when he transfers a murder investigation to the Enterprise in Wolf in the Fold. On NBC television network's Star Trek Colorcast, Friday, December 22nd, Kirk, Mr. Spock, and Dr. McCoy take Scotty to a pleasure planet, Argelius II, to help him recover from an injury. A beautiful dancer, Kara, is knifed to death while with all the evidence pointing to Scotty. During the investigation, two more women are murdered, and Scotty is again suspected, and the inquiry is bogged down by Hengist, the Argelian administrator, until Kirk insists it must be moved to the Enterprise. Then evidence begins to point to a Jack the Ripper type. Charles Macaulay portrays Jarrus, ruler of Argelius, and Pilar Surratt, his wife, Sibo, a seeress. An incident in Mr. Scott's recent past seems to suggest a motive. The head injury he suffered and is still recovering from was the result of an accident caused by a woman. An explosion on the Enterprise, which not only endangers Scotty and his engineering crew, but his precious engines. Even Kirk begins to doubt Scotty's innocence. The hook is irresistible. Jack the Ripper in outer space. More than just reinventing the story of a notorious serial killer, the concept is expanded to suggest that certain living things depend upon human emotions, such as fear, to sustain themselves. Wolf in the Fold is entertaining, although it has an atypical story arc. Hedonistic sexploitation gives way to gothic horror, then murder mystery complete with candlelight seance and screams in the dark, followed by a courtroom drama, a sci-fi funhouse romp, and finally broad comedy. Mr. Spock is quite absent from the first half of this episode, where the pacing seems to slow due to a pair of unusually long exposition scenes, each lasting several minutes. But the story picks up as it evolves and shifts from one genre to the next. In fact, at times it picks up too much. Some of the fear and terror injected into the script is hard to fully appreciate, with overlapping action, dialogue, and sound effects. It's easy to miss some attempts at taking life, such as the turbolift doors nearly cutting Spock in two, or the verbal threats that Jack announces over the address system, seriously. Still, this episode has plenty of highlights, such as the scene where Kirk carries the drugged and groggy Jack over his shoulder as the murderous entity giggles drunkenly. Kill, kill, kill you all. Like Cat's Paw, also by Robert Bloch, Wolf in the Fold is a guilty pleasure. Ah, okay. So let's go ahead and go through the episode itself. Then I'll return to the behind the scenes stuff as per usual. Okay. So we start with Kirk, McCoy, and Scotty taking some shore leave on Argelius II. Scotty taking a strong liking to the dancing girl that they've been watching. Kirk tells Scotty that he's arranged for her to visit them at their table after her performance is over, which thrills Scotty. But this guy sitting nearby, he doesn't seem so happy about it. Now, as he joins them, the man at the next table gets up and storms out while one of the musicians who's also watching them, leaves as well. Scotty then invites the girl to take a stroll with him, and they leave. Then Kirk and McCoy discuss Scotty and let us know that Scotty recently suffered a concussion in an explosion, which was caused by a female crew member. And McCoy wonders if Scotty is over his quote psychological resentment towards women, which seems like an odd thing to throw in. And even more odd when they've just sent him off alone with this woman. It's like, I hope he isn't just still angry and furious with women for causing this explosion. Okay, here's a woman, Scotty, go off alone with her. Just do what you want. Anyway, they decide to head over to another establishment, but as they leave they hear a scream, and then they find the young woman dead, apparently stabbed to death. And then they see Scotty holding a bloody knife and seemingly in a sort of daze. Now, afterward, Kirk and McCoy meet with Mr. Hingis, the city administrator, to discuss the case. We learn that Hingis is actually from Rigel 4 originally and not a native to Argelius II, having arrived on Argelius II about a year ago. He asks Scotty if he recognizes the murder weapon, but Scotty claims not to remember, saying that they were walking in the fog. Then she screamed, and he can't remember what happened after that. Mr. Hingis notes that Scotty's fingerprints are the only ones on the murder weapon, but Kirk points out that there were other people around when the murder took place. Then he asks what Argelius's laws are in these cases. And then they meet Jairus, who is the city's prefect or ruler, I guess, and his wife Sibo. Then we learn that some Argelians have empathic abilities, and Sibo is one of those people. Now, Jairus suggests that they go to his home and have Sibo attempt to learn what really happened using her psychic powers. Sibo needs time to prepare for this, though, and in the meanwhile, Kirk and Spock ask that they be allowed to send another crewman to beam down with a tricorder to perform a brain scan on Scotty. Hingist is opposed to this, but Jairus agrees, and so they allow it. Jairus tells Hingist to round up the other suspects and bring them as well, and as he is leaving, a female crew member, Lieutenant Tracy, beams down. Kirk orders Lieutenant Tracy to perform a brain scan on Scotty, and Jairus takes Tracy and Scotty to another room. For some reason, I don't know why, they can always do tricorder scans, just all the time, out in the field. So why they need another room for it, I don't know. But okay, and so after they leave, Kirk and McCoy again speculate on whether or not the recent concussion he suffered could have caused Scotty to become violent, even as they tell him to go off into another room alone with a woman to be examined. Brilliant. Just awesome. Then McCoy suggests that Scotty may be unable to remember because the memory is too traumatic, causing a psychological block of some kind. Jairus returns, and then his wife enters, saying that she's ready and wants to examine the knife so she can get psychic impressions from it. However, Jairus can't find the knife, which isn't on the nearby table where he left it. Uh-oh. Then they hear a scream and they move to investigate, while Jairus's wife oddly just stands around. They go into the room nearby and they find Scotty unconscious and Lieutenant Tracy is dead, stabbed multiple times. Afterwards, they question Scott, and he claims that the last thing he remembers is Lieutenant Tracy taking readings with the tricorder. Kirk asks Jairus if the room has another entrance, and he says there is, but it's been locked for years. But Kirk tells McCoy to go and take a look. Now, as he leaves, Hingist returns with the two men who left the cafe right before Scotty and the dancing girl left. Kirk questions the musician, who turns out to be the girl's father, and the other man, whose name is Morla. We find out that he was the girl's fiance. He claims that he left because he couldn't bear to watch her with another man. Then Jairus's wife, and yeah, and by the way, if I haven't mentioned, so on Argelius II, it's like a very hedonistic society, they say, and so I guess this sort of thing of maybe a woman who's in a relationship being familiar with other men, I guess, isn't seen as unusual. Then Jairus's wife tells them that she is ready, and they join her at the table. Now, Kirk suggests that the room be sealed so that no one can get in or out, and Jairus seals up all the doorways. Then Spock contacts Kirk, and he suggests that Scotty be beamed up and the matter investigated further there. But Kirk says that they have to abide by Argelian laws, even if they don't like it. Let me take a drink of water right quick here. Hold on. Okay. So they begin the ritual, which is very much like a seance. And Cebu says that she senses an evil presence that hates all life and hates women. Then she screams the names Baratus, Keslak, and Regic as the room goes dark for some reason. Now, when the light returns, they see Scotty standing with Cebu as she collapses to the floor, stabbed in the back. Afterwards, McCoy suggests that suggests taking Scotty to the Enterprise, where the Enterprise computer can evaluate his psychological state. Jarrus agrees, but tells Scotty that if he is proven guilty, he will face the Argelian penalty for his crimes, which is death by slow torture. Now, on the Enterprise, they question Scotty, and the computer states that while he does have a head injury, the injury can't account for his memory loss. Then Scotty says that he didn't black out when Cebu was killed. And he tells Kirk that during the ceremony, when the lights went out and she screamed, he moved to help her and he felt something in the way. Not so much a physical body as a presence, which he says felt like a cold draft. Kirk asks Scotty if he murdered Sibo, and Scotty says that he didn't. And the computer verifies that he is answering truthfully. Hingis questions this whole procedure and points out that that two other women were murdered as well. Kirk asks if Scotty killed the other two victims, and Scotty says he doesn't remember, which the computer also verifies. Hingist again disputes the results, but Jarrus says that he will continue to cooperate, but reserves the right to make any final judgments himself. Okay. Then they put Morla on the stand. And he is questioned. Now, Morla denies killing her, insisting that he loved her and she loved him. But her father then declares that that isn't true and that they fought constantly due to his jealousy, which she wasn't happy about. Kirk asks Morla if he killed Lieutenant Tracy or Sibo, which he denies, and the computer verifies that he is telling the truth. Then Kirk suggests that they're taking the wrong approach, and then they recall the names that she spoke, and has Spock search the computer for records for the name Baratus, Keslak, and Regic. It finds the name Regic and links it to Jack the Ripper. Hengist argues that can't be because Jack the Ripper died hundreds of years ago, but Jarrus notes that Sibo spoke of a hunger that never dies. Spock points out that there are life forms in the galaxy that are functionally immortal compared to humanoid standards. Then Spock suggests that the creature that committed the murders could feed on fear. But Hingis suggests that this is absurd, arguing that they have the prime suspect, Scotty, and the matter doesn't require further investigation. Questioning the computer further, they learn that there is an alien species which can feed on love, and therefore one which feeds on fear also seems possible. The computer also speculates that the creature doesn't have a physical form, but exists as a field of energy, only taking physical form when it kills. Spock also speculates that the creature attacks women as they are the more fearful of the genders. Yeah, so Star Trek's always been woke, sure. Again, Hingis disputes their findings, but Jarrus tells Hingis to STFU, if you know what I mean. Then Spock tells the computer to check the records for any other murders which might fit the circumstances of the killings on Argelius, and it rattles off a list of killings on Earth and other planets over the centuries. Spock notes that these planets all are more or less on a straight line between Earth and Argelius. Kirk then asks the computer to search the names Kesla and Baradas. And it says that Kesla is a name given to an unidentified murder on Deneb 2, and Baradas is the name given to an unidentified murder on Rigel 4, who murdered several women about a year ago. This causes them to look at Hengist, who came to Argelius from Rigel 2 about a year ago. Kirk tells Hengist to take the stand, but he refuses. Then they tell the computer to examine the knife, which was used to kill the victims, and it states that the knife originates from Rigel 4. Then Hingis goes berserk, and it's totally the actor. It's totally not a stuntman in a bad bald cap. It's totally the same guy. But yeah, he goes berserk and attempts to escape, but Kirk is able to deck him and knock him out. But McCoy tells Kirk that Hingis is dead. And just as Kirk says, that's impossible, the lights begin to flicker on and off, and a bodiless voice begins to laugh insanely and chant Regic. Then they realize that the entity has seized control. It's entered the ship's computer and seized control of the ship. Spock suggests that it will do various things to terrify the crew in order to feed off of their fear. Kirk orders McCoy to distribute sedatives to keep the crew calm and sedated while he and Spock try to find a way to stop it. So they enter a turbo lift, but it abruptly malfunctions. But when they arrive on the bridge, they learn that the life support is beginning to malfunction. Kirk tells the crew to keep calm and focus on their duties. As this is happening, Regic begins speaking over the intercom, threatening to kill them all. To keep the computer occupied, Spock tells the computer to compute the value of pi to the final digit. And Spock notes this is a transcendental number, so it has no final digit, which will keep the computer occupied indefinitely. Everyone on the bridge gets their sedative, which, it makes them all loopy and kind of giggly. Then they return to the hearing room. And with everyone sedated except McCoy, Jarrus, Spock, and Kirk orders McCoy to sedate himself. Then, when Kirk tries to sedate Jarrus, he goes berserk. He is also possessed by Regic now. He and Kirk struggle, but Spock subdues him with a nerve pinch. Then Regic re-enters Hengist, and he springs back to life while taking the stenographer hostage. He struggles with Kirk, who takes him to the transporter room, or who brings him down with a judo throw, and then McCoy sedates him as well. Then Kirk and Spock take him to the transporter room, and then they beam him out into space, dispersing his molecules. They don't seem too concerned that they just killed Hengist, who arguably was an innocent victim in this. I mean, it's not clear what culpability Hengist has. Was he, just possessed, unwillingly by Regic and didn't know it, or was he a willing accomplice? I mean, it's not really made clear, but there's never even in question. They're never like, gee, I wonder if we just killed an innocent guy. But oh well. Like I say, they don't seem terribly troubled by it. Then Kirk notes that the crew is going to be incapacitated due to the sedatives they've been given for several hours. Spock suggests that Kirk return to Argelius to finish his shore leave, and he begins to tell Kirk about a cafe where the women are really, something. He never finishes, realizing that Spock probably isn't too interested. And it ends there. Okay. So yeah, this is one I'm not going to say it's the greatest episode ever, but any episode that focuses on Scotty, I kind of appreciate. So I don't know. I give this one I guess maybe a B plus. It's pretty solid. All right. So with Wolf in the fold, horror genre writer Robert Bloch, following what little girls are made of in Catspaw, turned in his third script for Star Trek. Let me take that out. Let's see. Here we go. And it's a little cut off there. He turned in his third script for Star Trek. The title is explained in a line of dialogue by Spock. He says, I point out that an entity which feeds on violence, fear, and terror would find a perfect hunting ground on Argelius, a planet without violence, where the inhabitants are as peaceful as sheep, where the entity would be as a hungry wolf in that fold. When putting together elements for his latest script, Bloch did as he had with his other Star Trek assignments and borrowed from his own stockpile of short stories. This time he took from yours truly, Jack the Ripper, first published in Weird Tales in 1943. It was their idea, Bloch said, referring to Star Trek's two Genes. They wanted me to do a Jack the Ripper story in the future, so I said, all right, let's put him into a computer or something instead of having him skulking around with a knife on shipboard. In Bloch's original outline, it was Sulu, not Scotty, who is accused of murdering a woman on Argelius. And the action quickly moves from the planet to the starship where the helmsman is put on trial. At this point, much earlier than in the final version, the Ripper takes over the computer and thereby the ship. Also different, the events surrounding this takeover are more horrific than what was filmed and aired on NBC, with additional attempts by Jack using the mechanics of the starship to frighten, maim, and kill crew members. Based on his regard for James Doohan's acting, it was associate producer Robert Justman's idea to change the accused from Sulu to Scotty for, quote, a better chance at dramatics. Justman, let me see. Oh, no, okay, here we go. Act 4 involved a lengthy battle of wills between Kirk and the ship's computer, with the captain using logic to defeat the entity as he had done with Landru, the computer, in The Return of the Archons. As in that episode, which Robert Bloch had an opportunity to watch, the computer shorts out. Worse, Bloch had the onboard computer explode, resulting in a great deal of damage to the ship. Kuhn didn't ask Bloch for a rewrite. To save time, he just made the changes himself. Looking for a way to get McCoy into the story sooner, script consultant Dory Fontana suggested to Kuhn that the doctor be there from the start, accompanying the others to the nightclub. Beyond this, there we go. Beyond this, her main opposition to the story concerns Bloch's idea to have the thrust of the story to be that the entity taking over the computer and events which would last for half the episode. Fontana wanted that cut back, and she didn't like the ending, prompting her to write, quote, do we have to do the old feed the computer logic to make it drop dead or give up or something to resolve the story bit? We've really done that to death, and it ought to be allowed to rest in peace. Having already been used in Return of the Archons, the bit was also present in the story outlines for The Changeling and for I Mud, which both were turned in 1 month before Wolf in the Fold. So Scotty was in, Sulu, to George Takei's chagrin, was out. Although Takei was nonetheless given some delightful business to do, including a chance to act very stoned. Pleased by this change was the episode's director, Joseph Pevney. There we go. He said Jimmy Doohan was very easy to work with, a good, solid performer, always anxious to do a good job, and he always knew his words inside and out. An angel as far as directors are concerned. Doohan, of course, was happy over the change, saying, quote, I got to do some acting. Here was Scotty being threatened. He having to protect himself, but he didn't know how. I thought, thank God they're doing something with me. On May 18th, Robert Bloch delivered his first draft screenplay. Dorothy Fontana was appalled. She wrote to Gene Kuhn, I will not comment on the quality of the dialogue, sufficient to say, oi. There is definitely not enough Spock. We don't dig deeply enough into Scotty. All we see from Scotty is hostility. That we don't need. We need a man crying out that he is innocent in the face of all the facts arranged against him. Now, Roddenberry um, also took a look at the script and he had questions about it as well and also wanted changes made. Roddenberry had tried to develop a couple of Star Trek sex stories for season one, but other than Mudd's women, none had really worked out. He did sneak some naughtiness into his rewrite of Bloch's What Are Little Girls Made Of, with the android Andrea programmed to please a man in all ways. And for this new season's first episode, it was Roddenberry's idea to make the theme in Cat's Paw have to do with lust and an alien's first experience at pleasure of the flesh. Wolf in the Fold offered the opportunity for some playful sexiness too. Um, okay, so then they contacted Block and they suggested some changes that he make to the script. Block made these changes and then turned in his rewrite. Fontana read it and then wrote to Kuhn, there is still a great deal of clarification that needs to be done and some restructuring as well as a total dialogue polish. Spock needs to be used more, and I feel Kirk would employ Spock's natural Sherlock Holmes talents earlier in the script. Justman echoed these feelings in his latest memo, but neither he nor Fontana knew of Kuhn's need to minimize the use of Spock in this episode. A week earlier, the Emmy nominations had been announced, with Nimoy receiving acknowledgement, and Shatner was ignored. That same week, there was an article in TV Guide raving over Spock, again with the Shatner Kirk being ignored. And Kuhn just had circulated the mimeograph first draft script for the Doomsday Machine to the cast. Spock not only had much more business than Kirk, he had much more interesting business. William Shatner, Star Trek's top billed star, had reason to be unhappy. Doomsday needed some rewriting, but the structure and what worked best for that story did not provide much opportunity to take from Spock and give to Kirk. Wolf in the Fold was Kuhn's opportunity to shift the balance the other way, and he hoped to prevent further ill feelings on the set. Not only did Kuhn appear determined to keep Spock out of the first half of the show, he chose to speed through the rewriting process and scheduled Wolf to immediately follow the Doomsday Machine on the production roster. This would give assurance to Shatner that the creative staff, unlike the studio's promotional department, hadn't turned their backs on him. The structure for the script also served NBC's Stan Robertson, who had been asking for more planet based stories and more focus on the differences between the societies which lived on these worlds and our own. Kuhn's mind was made up. Spock and the Enterprise would have to wait until the start of Act 3. It was now time for the staff to take over. The first draft came in the rewritten first draft came in early June. It was one of those, as Dorothy Fontana described it, quote, where you clean it up, make them sound like our people, but don't mess with the structure jobs. Kuhn was resisting allowing any significant changes to be made, doing what he believed would best appease Shatner and Robertson, with less than 2 weeks before the start of production, no less. Even though Kuhn had taken care to keep Kirk in more of the story than Spock, among the problem areas that Roddenberry had identified was the need for more Kirk. Being in a script and doing something in a script are two different things. Emphasis on Kirk's conflict needed further amplification, including his wanting to help his engineer while having to maintain peaceful relations with the leaders of Argelius. This coupled with the doubt Kirk feels when the man he has been fighting for appears to have killed one of his the captain's own female crew members, as well as the planet leader's wife. And Kirk had to appear more threatened by the danger to his ship once Jack the Ripper moved into its computers. So Kuhn then did another rewrite. Kuhn's revised script was the final draft in mid-June. Among the changes, more of Kirk doing and not just being, and more emphasis on the culture and laws of Argelius II. And Kuhn added more science fiction mixed in with the macabre, mystery, and terror. Kirk and Spock both argue that humans and humanoids make up only a small percentage of known life forms. The possibility of entities capable of deriving sustenance from other emotions, how creatures of this type would likely exist without form and be practically immortal, about the Drella of Alpha Carina 5 and the Melodus cloud creatures of Alpha Majoris. It was now sci-fi enough for the character of Hingis to rise up during the trial and angrily cry out, "This is fantastic!" Hold on, I'm going to take a drink of water again right quick. Ooh. Okay. One idea that was too fantastic for NBC concerned the drink served to Kirk, McCoy, and Scott while visiting the cafe. David Gerrold, working at Star Trek on his own script, The Trouble with Tribbles, remembered hearing Gene Kuhn on the phone arguing with Stan Robertson. Gerald said, quote, "In the teaser of that show, Robert Bloch had postulated a 9-layered drink. Each layer of liquid caused the imbiber to experience a different emotion. Kirk, Spock, and Scotty and McCoy were sitting in a pub on Argelius II and drinking these concoctions. And they experienced grief, joy, rage, love, envy, unhappiness, etc. in unison. The network thought this bore an uncomfortable resemblance to a psychedelic drug or narcotic. NBC's broadcast standards said so. Gene Kuhn told them that they were full of BS. I'm sure he felt better for it, but the drink was excised from the script. Once Kuhn finished with his rewrites, Roddenberry did a polish of his own, which was turned in on June 21st. Quote, "Of course, I kept a close eye on the scripts," Roddenberry told this author. "You can see that in the memos. I wasn't rewriting everything as in the first year. Gene Kuhn was handling most of that by the second season. And we made sure he had good support with Dorothy Fontana, someone he could hand work off to. But because of the system set up by the networks, having you wait until the last possible moment to find out if you have been picked up, then you have to develop 16 or more stories simultaneously. I sometimes would take on the final rewrite of a script to free Gene and Dorothy to stay busy on others that were coming in. Don Ingalls' Vietnam parallel, A Private Little War, was one of those, and Bob Bloch's script. You can check the dates on those. Sometimes we were still rewriting as they were being filmed. I was a little surprised when I saw it on the screen," Bloch said of the finished episode. "I was never told who had a hand in making the changes and revisions, but I rather suspect it was DC because I think most of them were pretty good." Not DC this time, but rather Gene Roddenberry and Gene Kuhn. Despite being pleased with his bigger role, James Doohan had mixed feelings about the ending. He found the tag scene, an attempt at humor by Kuhn, to be unforgivably illogical. Kirk tries to talk Spock into beaming down to the planet with him to check out a place where the women are soon. A line that Kirk never finishes because network standards will not allow us to hear the particulars. Doohan considered it interesting that Kirk would consider leaving the ship in the care of 430 drunken crewmen. Yeah, and I mean, it's an oddly humorous note to end on after you basically just murdered a guy. you know? Okay. So Joseph Pevney only had 5 days to prepare this episode, since Mark Daniels' previous episode, The Doomsday Machine, was shooting in 5 days rather than 6. Casting had to be done quickly. John Fielder was 41 when he played Mr. Hingist. Say, let me find him. Here he is. And if you grew up, you were around in the 70s, 60s, and 70s, you saw this guy on TV a lot. He's one of those character actors at the time. He was all over the place. He was in westerns, he was in comedies. I'm pretty sure he was on like Andy Griffith. I'm pretty sure. Little House on the Prairie, just about any show from the 60s and 70s you can think of. He was working a lot. And of course, he has a very distinctive voice. Because of Fielder's unique looks and more so his voice, he worked often in television and in film. He was Cadet Alfie Higgins on the 1950s series Tom Corbett Space Cadet. He visited the Twilight Zone and Get Smart and was one of the jurors in 12 Angry Men. Yeah, he was in that too. In a few years, he would be one of Felix and Oscar's regular poker buddies in The Odd Couple, both the movie and the TV series, and then spend several years on the Bob Newhart show. He would also provide the voice of Piglet in Winnie the Pooh cartoons from 1968 until his death in 2005. Joseph Pevney called Fielder one of his favorite actors, saying, quote, "He doesn't look like an actor, he doesn't sound like an actor, and he's an excellent actor. In Wolf on the Fold, he was very interesting and quite good." Fielder once remarked, "People will come up and say, 'Gosh, I thought it was you. Then I heard your voice and I knew.' 9 times out of 10, they don't know my name." Fielder's casting as Hengist was perfect. With that face and that voice, few watching would suspect Hengist of being Jack the Ripper. Charles Macaulay, seen here as Prefect Jarrus. Let me see, I'll find him. There he is. Had appeared on Star Trek previously. He played Landru in Return of the Archons, and he does look different. He's got his hair's different. He's got the beard and mustache. I had until I read this, I hadn't realized it was the same actor. He was 39 when he did this episode. Pilar Surratt, playing Sibo with a knife in her back, was 29. She was a former dancer who ventured into television in the late 1950s, working often wherever a pretty Asian face was needed, including prominent roles on Hawaiian Eye, Adventures in Paradise, and I Spy. Joe DaGosta had cast her previously in an episode of The Lieutenant. Charles Deercop as Morla. He's back here. There he is. And I know I've seen him in other stuff from back then. I don't remember specifically what I saw him in. He was 30 years old. He was 1 year away from saddling up in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid as a character named Flatnose Curry, followed by countless TV appearances, including appearing on 91 episodes of Policewoman. Okay, so that's probably where it was. John Winston, playing Lieutenant Kyle, the transporter room chief, got to have a bit of fun in the tag scene, happily sedated. Winston, who started out on Star Trek as a bit player but had extensive experience on stage, was being given more prominent roles with each appearance. Let me bring it back to him here. Okay, well, I guess I didn't capture any shots with him in it, but he's there in the transporter room. It was Shatner because he was so clever with it all, which gave it credibility. He was the star, he was the sun, and the rest of the cast being the rest of planets circulating around him. I'm sorry, I lost my place. Yeah. So, yeah, Winston said Star Trek was almost a mixture of comedy and melodrama. It was Shatner because he was so clever with it all, which gave it credibility. Tanya Lamani, let me go back to her. Was the first victim. She worked both on and off screen as an exotic dancer and played a Persian slave girl in the unsold TV pilot Alexander the Great, which aired in 1968, 3 years after being filmed. Alexander, of course, was himself played by William Shatner. And Adam West was in that show as well. I'm guessing that it was probably aired in 68 because by that point, West and Shatner were both big stars on TV with Star Trek and Batman. So they decided, hey, we got this TV movie with them that we already paid for. We might as well show it. Lamani recalls, when I walked onto the set of Alexander the Great, I saw him and he had this little skirt on and had the cutest legs. And I thought, oh my God, who is that Greek god? And they said, that's William Shatner. And I go, oh my God. I was like 16 years old. And as we were filming, he kept looking and smiling and finally came up to me and whispered to me with his very sexy voice saying that he wanted to take me out. Okay, Bill. And I'm looking at him and thinking, well, yeah, I want to go out with him. My heart was pounding and I was getting nervous, but I said, I'm sorry, I'd love that, but you're married. And he said, well, what's that got to do with anything? And, he is a big Romeo. And I said, well, just don't go out with married men. 2.5 years later, after that meeting, Lamani, at the ripe old age of 19, had already appeared in several TV shows, including The Man from U.N.C.L.E., McHale's Navy, I Dream of Jeannie, and Get Smart. They wanted someone who had acting experience and dancing, she said. So I auditioned. Roddenberry was there, and Gene Kuhn, and the casting person was there, and Joe Pevney, the director. And Gene Roddenberry was a lovely man. He was very warm, very personable. Personable. He smiled and he talked to you as if you were his relative. He made you feel comfortable. Lamani had never seen Star Trek. She explained, quote, at that time, I was working at a restaurant at night in the Greek village, dancing, and during the days, I would go on interviews for roles. So that's why I didn't get a chance to see the show. But when I read the script, I didn't have a problem imagining what it would be like. I thought it was very clever. And what kept that show going was the good scripts. Okay. So then they moved into filming. Day one began in the briefing room set that dominated Act Three, where Scotty is proven innocent and the true identity of the killer is revealed. There's one curious shot that involved James Doohan's hand, or what the viewer would assume was the hand of James Doohan. Let's go. Let me see. Okay. I guess it's going to be in the first part here. Let me bring this up. Okay, so I guess I don't have the shot here, but there's a shot, I think, kind of a close up where, it's like right before this where they've got the little hand scanner and Scotty is told to put his hand on the scanner and there's a close up of his hand, but apparently that was not his hand because, of course, James Doohan actually has had rather, a couple of missing fingers on that hand. Which he was always very good at keeping hidden. And so it's actually a stunt hand in that scene. Eddie Paskey, who was, of course, Shatner's stunt double, said, I was Jimmy's hand double. He was missing a finger, and anytime he would run the controls on the transporter room or something like that, those were actually my hands, not Jimmy's. Okay, on day two of filming, a second day in the briefing room where Hingist is revealed to be the entity known as Jack the Ripper. Stuntman Paul Baxley, doubling for John Fielder, bore little resemblance to the actor. Yeah, I mean, the stunt double is so obvious. It's one of the weaknesses of this episode. Um, can I get to? Oh, why is it? Okay. Okay, let me bring that up here. Here we go. Here we go. I mean, it's just, even in this shot, you can tell it's not the same guy. I mean, it's just so obvious. And the bald cap he's wearing is just obviously kind of fake. It's really the worst part of the episode, really. During the fight scene between Hingist and Kirk, it is clear that Fielder has been replaced. But keep your eye on William Shatner. William Shatner proves to be quite daring and fast on his feet. Okay. So On day 5 of filming, the morning was spent filming the episode's teaser featuring Kirk, McCoy, and Scotty being entertained by the dancer. Roddenberry got into the act by helping to choose the outfits worn by the various beautiful and voluptuous women in the cafe. His memo on the subject told Bill Theis, the costume designer, quote, should suggest we consider clothing all females in the script in some particular striking shade of crimson or red. The costumes can differ if we want, but this is the female color on this planet. Joseph Pevney had also vested himself in the process of choosing the right look for the women on a world that prided itself on being hedonistic. Tanya Lamani said, quote, the first thing that I had to do was go there for makeup for 4 days in a row. They were experimenting with different makeup on me. The first time they took hours and hours of putting different colored feathers on my eyebrows, my eyelashes, my toes and ears, and feathers were coming from all over. And I kept sneezing. I couldn't see where I was going, so each time they would do all that and take me to Joseph Pevney, and he'd look and he'd say, no less. And this went on for 4 days. I didn't care because they were paying me, and finally he said, don't use anything, I just want to see your face. And that's how it happened. No feathers or nothing. Lamani's 5th day at the studio was her first day on set. She remembered, quote, the stage was big and it was a very nice set with a little stage for me to dance. We rehearsed a few times and they had other people sit in for the main actors. And then the actors came in and we had another run through. That's when I was introduced to all the guys. And I looked at Shatner and I said, oh, do you remember me from Alexander the Great? And he said, of course I remember you. And of course he was flirting with me. Lamani, with an eye-opening close-up, kicked off Wolf in the Fold. There's no Enterprise flyby, as usually you see. No captain's log, just a sudden fade in on her face, which Joseph Pevney fussed over, with the crash of a cymbal followed by Alexander Courage's Orion Slave Girl music from the cage. Uh, Lamani wiggled and jiggled in an outfit that was quite revealing, a bit too much for NBC's taste. Quote, in those days, you were not supposed to show your belly button on TV, Lamani said, and they would glue things into your belly button. It was some kind of a flower, but it would pop out. So that would slow things down, stop and go more than normal. And they had to do that a few times because it wouldn't stick. It was known before the film was sent to editing that this episode would begin with a close up of the exotic female dancer well into her performance. Credit Stan Robertson of NBC. He had been very clear about his disfavor of teasers, always beginning with a shot of the Enterprise. Only The Conscience of the King, Tomorrow is Yesterday, and The Devil in the Dark had started differently. By this point, the 7th episode of the new season, his request became an order, and Wolf in the Fold was the first of several scripts to have the standard Star Trek opening written out and replaced with immediate action on the surface of a planet. Lamani remembered Joseph Pevney was very creative. What impressed me about him was when they did my close up, he was talking to me and he told me, imagine this, imagine that, and look right into the camera and imagine that you're going into Scotty's mind. And he was saying several things like that. And when the close up came, he wanted to light it up a certain way. He took his time. And when they showed it in the dailies, people who were watching literally let out a gasp because it was on the big screen and such a big close up and it was so striking. Regarding the time she spent playing a corpse, Lamani said, quote, there was no stunt double. That was me lying there breathing in all that artificial fog. They used that stuff a lot in those days, and of course it would choke you up a bit. I had to come up for fresh air a few times or ask for water just to get the taste of that fog out of my mouth. I'd take a deep breath and hold it for as long as I could. You could breathe it, but it wasn't pleasant. And I guess I should show that shot as well, right? There she is. With a script tailored to showcase Kirk over Spock, some saw an improvement in Shatner's mood during the filming of Wolf in the Fold. Others did not. Tanya Lamani on Shatner's mood during the Tanya Lamani on set for one day, but in the makeup room and the screening room on 3 other days, saw a happy company and was particularly impressed by Shatner, who she said made her visit to Star Trek great fun. John Fielder, present for all 6 days of filming, saw things differently, saying that Shatner was bossy and generally unpleasant. The recollections of most involved with Star Trek tell us that throughout the production of the series, the mood on the set was exceptionally good, and the so called Shatner Nimoy feud was short lived. Many remarked that cast and crew seemed like a family, but families still fight. Wolf in the Fold came in at $9,718 over budget, a total cost of $189,718, which equates to a little over 1.3 million in 2013, about half of what would be spent on an episode of a 1-hour series at that same time. The second season deficit, good lord, the second season deficit increased to $122,171, or just under 900,000 in 2013. And let's see. Tanya Lamani took the night off from dancing when Wolf in the Fold had its only NBC airing. Quote, I saw it when it played and I loved it, she said. It turned out to be better than the script. The writing helped to make that show, but of course, so did the actors. I thought that all the actors played off each other beautifully. And I think that's what made the show great, the actors and the stories. Star Trek's competition, besides Gomer Pyle and Hondo at 8:30, was the movie on CBS at 9 p.m. The 1962 Cold War drama Escape from East Berlin, starring Don Murray and based on a true story of a family tunneling under the Berlin Wall to escape from the communism. Wolf in the Fold is the only first run episode of the original Star Trek for which a ratings report could not be located. So I can't tell you what the ratings were for this episode. Interesting, that's the only one. I wonder why the ratings aren't available. This episode had everything that Stan Robertson relentlessly asked for: a teaser that did not begin with the standard shot of the Enterprise in space, a plot line unlike any other, taking place on an alien world with customs of a society foreign to our own, and a story utilizing Mr. Scott. And yet, despite following Robertson's guidelines, Wolf in the Fold was buried in the schedule, airing less than a week before Christmas, and there would be no repeat viewing of it in the summer. Quote, that rarely had anything to do with the network, Robert Justman revealed. The decision regarding which episodes to repeat was primarily mine. I picked the ones I liked. Now, of course, I liked them all, but I did not like them all equally. As for its writer, Robert Bloch dropped by later in the season to discuss another script assignment, but chose to pass on any further work. He explained, quote, I didn't care for what was happening to Star Trek towards the end of the second season. I said to myself, this isn't going to be anything I'm likely to be interested in. The original concept had become so eviscerated that I would just stay away. Not that I'm a purist, but when a show reaches that point, that's trouble. Life is too short. Block would be referring to the change in command in the Star Trek offices, but that is another story that is still to come. Uh, Samuel Peoples said, I've always been a Jack the Ripper buff, so Bob's version of a science fiction Jack the Ripper had always amused me, and I enjoy it very much. John Fielder, Jack the Ripper himself, said, quote, Star Trek is the thing more popular people stop and ask me about than anything else I've ever done because it plays all the time. I think about those old episodes, and I have watched them lately, and they didn't have the technical stuff that came along later. So what they did instead was rely on good stories. The one I was in was a good story with very few trick effects. Tanya Lamani, in conversation with this author 43 years after Wolf in the Fold first aired, said, quote, those scripts were clever. When Star Trek became so popular, I understood why. Because when you look at every episode, the stories were so good and so uplifting. They all had such great uplifting messages. And I think that's what people relate to, and they still do. And that's what makes the show as popular as it is. Right now, I go and sign autographs, and those little kids come up to my table. Little kids, and they even know the title, and they say, oh, I've seen Wolf in the Fold. I'm so in awe of it. I think that's just wonderful. And, it's interesting, of course, that this episode features Jack the Ripper. Uh, since I assume you probably know, but Jack the Ripper's identity, it seems, has recently been revealed. What was this, a couple of months ago? Um, I don't know, like maybe 3 months ago. It was earlier this year. But if you don't know, so basically they took some blood off of the dress of one of the victims, and they tested it, and I guess they tested different samples, and some of them, of course, were the victim's blood, but there was some blood on the dress that was not hers that belonged to someone else. And then doing DNA matching with some of the known suspects that were believed to be Jack the Ripper, they came up with a match. And I forget his name now, but the guy was actually a Polish immigrant to Britain from Poland, who was a barber. And he had actually been a suspect at one point. And if I recall, I believe it said that he likely had schizophrenia. Of course, they didn't have quite the diagnostic techniques we have now, but the guy had mental problems, and he probably had some psychotic behavior. And it looks like maybe part of the reason why the killing suddenly stopped is because this guy was actually committed to an asylum. He was put in a mental asylum, and I guess he remained there all his life. I don't know. Um, what was this? I can't remember his name now. But it's one of those things where I guess it's kind of cool that they identified him, but it also does, of course, take a lot of the mystery away. The mystery of Jack the Ripper's been fodder for a number of stories, including in science fiction. Another good example, of course, is the Babylon 5 episode. It's like a, I think it's one of the first episodes in the third season. I think. What's the name of it? I forget the name now. Where this guy is sent by the Vorlons to test Delenn to determine if she's the right person to lead the fight against the Shadows. And it's this, British guy. And of course, in the end, it's revealed in a big twist that he is Jack the Ripper. That's actually one of the Babylon 5 episodes I'm not crazy about. I thought that particular twist was kind of, I don't know. It just seemed like a bizarre twist just to be a bizarre twist. I didn't feel like it really made a whole lot of sense, to be honest, but whatever. And of course, there have been other fictional stories, I believe, that have used the Jack the Ripper story as fodder as well. But anyway, yeah. So grade B plus on this one. Definitely a very good episode. I might have given it an A minus if it weren't for that bad stunt scene. Ugh, that's bad. Okay. So let's see. I should be doing another Trek Talk next week, next Tuesday. And the next episode will be The Changeling. So, uh, uh, so I guess I'll go ahead and end the stream here. Before you go, please do like this stream, and please do sub to the channel before you go. And I will see you all next week. Also, I'll probably be doing a stream this Sunday night, as I have. And what else? Oh, I'll have, I just saw Thunderbolts earlier today. So I should have my Thunderbolts review up in a day or two. Until then, everyone, take care. Thanks to those who stopped by to check out the stream. And thanks to those who will check it on a rewatch. And I will see you all later. Have a good evening.